was he suggested to me, we put our heads together when I was at the NHL many years ago, and he was at USA Hockey. Together, we started the NHL USA Hockey Diversity Task Force. And one of the things that Lou suggested that we do was find and reach out to Willie O'Ree, which I did. So it was Lou's push that made me do that, and it's resulted in years of working with Willie and doing really fun stuff together. It's been great. Next, I think Bill Douglas is back. We had a little technical issue earlier, but Bill is with us as well. Bill also is a very dear friend. Bill's a fantastic journalist for many years, also a very good goalie from the time he was 13 or so in the Philadelphia area. And now, or started a number of years ago, started a blog called The Color of Hockey. And it's the most comprehensive, most well-read journal of its kind. He really chronicles and digs deep on stories around non-traditional hockey participants. It's a must-read, so much of a must-read that about 3 years ago, the NHL purchased it and hired Bill full-time. So he's part of NHL.com. He works as an editor and writer there, and he's going to moderate for us. Been kind enough to do that. So welcome, Bill, and thanks for joining us. And then a newer friend, but also equally as important, with an incredible trajectory in this game, is Chanel Keenan. Chanel is a senior at UMass, wise beyond her years. She's done work in the disabled community that I think is groundbreaking, showing incredible bravery in saying to the Bruins initially, hey, we're fans too, and we belong in this game. We have a place in this game. And she did such a great job of that she caught the attention of the Seattle Kraken, where she is now the first ever, I believe, in hockey, maybe in sports, the first ever intersectionality consultant in the game, talking about the role of women, the role of the disabled community, and making the game more inclusive for everyone. She is a great voice for the game. And again, I think he's going to do incredible things in this sport and beyond. So so the four of us have joined together. We're going to serve as the panel tonight. Bill is going to moderate, but they asked me to, as well as just saying hello and introducing my friends, to say a little bit about what prompted the efforts to make the film. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to see it. It's a labor of love. The same really flowing out of the work that Lou and I have done over many years, and I mentioned Lou specifically because he's here, but that's a list that includes literally thousands of people in the communities tying skates and sewing jerseys and helping kids all kids get an opportunity to play. That's what we set out, and it's come to fruition. There are now about 30 programs around the country that the NHL still works closely with, serves as a little legacy to what Lou and I started way back when. And something that we're very proud of, but yet it's got incredible room to grow, and we want to see that happen over time. But the film itself started about the effort for the film. It was an outgrowth of an effort to get Willie into the Hockey Hall of Fame. He celebrated his 60th anniversary of his first game about 3 years ago, this last month in January, the Boston Garden. He invited myself and my wife and my children to so I just saw somebody said the film is not accessible in the UK. You can go to and that's Richard, go to lessons from Willie.com, and you can see the film there for free. It's a site that we'll talk about later in this conversation, but that's a place you can get it for free if you want to watch it worldwide. So this effort started as an outgrowth of trying to get Willie to the Hockey Hall of Fame, and we went that night to watch the 60th anniversary of Willie's commemoration of him playing in the NHL, or breaking the barrier to playing the NHL. And it just so happened that there were senior NHL people that were there with us, and Gary Bettman, the commissioner, was there, and I turned to him and I said, "We have to get him in the Hall of Fame. This is an opportunity for generational impact to do something special, to do something important, and really to honor what Willie has done. We'll talk a lot about Willie as the night goes on, but he is just an exceptional person, and he has blazed a trail that is singular in what he's done, and wanted to honor him in that way. Had a conversation. I was at my place in New York City, had a conversation with my neighbor, who's a super smart investigative journalist, and she suggested we should make a film. And it hit me right away. Yes, that makes a ton of sense. Her name is Laurence Mathieu Legere, brilliant artist, and we set out on making a film very quickly afterwards, really with the intent of creating a piece of scalable content. One of the statistics that we saw when we started to put together Willie's his story for Hall of Fame consideration was over a 23-year period. When he took the job, he was in his early 60s. Over the next 23 years, he's now 85, right? We figured out from his itineraries, his travel schedule, that Willie had cumulatively been on an airplane. He lives in San Diego, and he travels all over the country and all over North America and all over the world, being kind of the Pied Piper, if you will, of hockey, making the game accessible to kids of color. We figured out that Willie had been on a plane cumulatively for more than 6 years. He's just boundless energy, never stops. Even he's 85 and we have a hard time slowing him down. That said, we wanted to make something that traveled, where he didn't have to, where the people on this call didn't have to be evangelists, that the film would speak for itself. And our intent was to, first and foremost, to honor Willie, to support his Hall of Fame candidacy, to make generational impact, and to create, if possible, a social justice film disguised as a hockey movie. That was our intent from the beginning. We wanted to push a little bit, push the boundaries, expand people's aperture from here, to open minds and hearts, and to do our part to change the game and to make it more inclusive, which is a thread that runs through everything that we've done for a long time and will continue for a long time to ensure that the sport is for everyone. So that's the genesis of it. We'll talk in more depth about it and answer questions as we get along, but wanted to turn to Bill, who's going to serve as the moderator, and we'll start to go through for the first half an hour, 45 minutes, hear from each of the panelists, and be happy to share our thoughts on the film, social justice, anything else, Williston, anything else that you want to talk about. So, Bill.
Well, thank you, Bryant, and thank you everybody for being very patient with me. And one of the things about everybody being home is there's only so much Wi-Fi in the house, so I had a little bit of a scramble. Bryant was very kind in his words about what I do, and I really appreciate that. And Bryant's been a big fan for a long time, and hockey's a funny sport. You get into hockey in different ways, and for me, I got involved with hockey from being sick. I was homesick in bed. I had like strep throat and diphtheria. I was about 13 years old, and I was bedridden for like 3 weeks. And I watched everything on TV and I was bored. And I'm old enough to be a person where when I was 13, you only had 3.5 channels on your TV set. And the 0.5 channel was PBS. So I was so desperate, so bored, that I actually turned on to PBS. And the first Russia Team Canada series was on. And I saw that and I liked it. I didn't know what it was, but I liked it. So crawled out of bed, went down to the computer of the day, which was called the Encyclopedia Britannica, looked up hockey, saw what hockey was, got well, saved allowance, bought skates, taught myself how to skate, saved more allowance, bought goalie equipment, taught myself how to play goal. Joined a team when I was 13 years old. Didn't tell my parents at the time because, I was sort of a sickly kid. But finally, when you join a team, your parents find out you have games to go to. So, my mom looked at me and said, okay, you paid your money, you joined the team, but you lose teeth, that's it. No more hockey for you. So about the third game, I lost one of my lower fronts, puck hit my mass jar, the tooth loose. So she said, remember what I said? And she said, a deal's a deal. I said, fine. So every time her friends came over, I just smiled, a big full smile, had implants in about 2 weeks. So that was my introduction to hockey, and, been playing ever since, been following it ever since. And, it's a game that has changed and evolved. I mean, if you look at, the Hollywood Squares panel of people that are here, you're seeing that hockey, my title of the blog is The Color of Hockey, but my initial thought was to call it, hockey is not just for white folks anymore, but my wife talked me down from that. The game has changed to the point where everybody's playing it. Like I said, I've been playing it since I was 13 years old. And I'm not alone. I mean, we're a small army, but we're a growing army, and that's where we are today in this game. And the idea behind what Bryant and what Lou did back in the 90s, and what Bryant continues to do with the Willie documentary, is keep moving that forward to acknowledge what's gone before and to create more in the future. And that's important. So this is why we're here this evening. And, it's been a fun ride telling people stories. And there's so many, hockey stories out there that people say, well, how much, minority hockey can you write? Well, the blog's in year 9 now. And, there are still so many stories to be told, and still so many stories that are happening right now. So, that's where we are. So, it's hockey. It's a game that teaches you, responsibility. It teaches you teamwork. It teaches you to be on time. And the best thing about this game is it's a great connector. And this is why the game has to be diverse and inclusive. I mean, I think of all the major league sports, of all the 4 sports, football, baseball, basketball, hockey, I think hockey leads to more opportunities for more people. A quick story, about my late mother. She relented and let me play. I didn't have an easy time playing when I was a kid. When I was 13, I played midget, I played junior. And, I got called names. I got puck shot at my head. I had a whole lot of bad things happen to me, but my parents never pulled me out. And, they thought, as long as I can handle it, as long as I'm enjoying myself, they weren't going to interfere. But they never quite understood why I was playing hockey. So about 7, 8 years ago, in my previous life, I covered politics in Washington, D.C. I covered the White House for Bill Clinton's last term, 2 terms of George Bush. I got invited to the Christmas party at the Canadian Embassy, and I took my mom. And, we're talking with, the U.S. ambassador to Canada, or the Canadian ambassador to the United States. And I'm talking to them about hockey for about an hour, hour and a half. We're just literally just talking about hockey. And as we were leaving, my mother looked at me and she said, I get it now. And that's what hockey does. Hockey presents opportunities. It's a game of opportunity. It's a game of opportunity on the ice. It's a game of opportunity off the ice. Connections, the people you meet, the friends you make, all of that, is hockey. And I can't think of another sport that does that. So that is why we're here. So without further ado, if people have questions, if people want to know a bit more about, hockey, about me, about Bryant, about Lou, about Chanel. I want to know more about Chanel. I want to know how you got that Kraken job. I want a Kraken job. Definitely. And a quick story about the Seattle Kraken. And Chanel can speak to this. They will take the ice next season in the 21-22 season. The Kraken has made its mission to be a pinnacle of diversity and inclusiveness. They want to be the model, the gold standard in the National Hockey League for that. And they've kept their word. I mean, the hires that they have made, they hired the first Black team broadcaster, Everett Fitzhugh, who'll be doing radio play-by-play for the Kraken when they take the ice. They hired a very interesting brother and sister team, the Boyd family. their dad is the team physician for the Minnesota Wild. He was one of the first black team physicians in the National Football League, and the first black team physician in the National Hockey League. So Seattle has embraced this, and they're running with it. And other teams are taking notice. And I think in the coming seasons and coming years, you're going to see more people of color, not just on the ice, but off the ice in key positions. And that's one of the things that they're proud about. So with that, questions?
Well, Bill, do you want to? Well, let's go to the panelists first.
Yes,
I'll start it off.
I apologize. I have gassed on. Lou,
No problem.
You're up, Lou.
Lou, do you want to talk about the changes you've seen over the last 30 years in the game?
Yeah, well, let me just go back to the middle 60s. I'll be 76 in a couple of weeks, so I can go back far. In the middle 60s, we had no ice rinks until the middle 60s in New York City, zero. We had Madison Square Garden. On top of that, a thing called Iceland, but it had no boards, just for figure skaters, had a rail. And I'm out of the Army, and my friend Bart Grillo says to me, they're gonna take the New York City building in Flushing and turn it into an ice skating rink. We were thrilled. We played roller skate hockey. It's a great game. We played on roller skates. There's guys in the Hall of Fame that played on roller skates. Joe Mullen, as an example, from Hell's Kitchen, and others. And that shows you, if you really want something and you have some talent and you're committed, you can achieve it. Well, it turned into a rink. We had hundreds of kids who played roller hockey. So all we had to do was start an ice hockey league, and we did. $15 for the season, included everything, and 355 kids signed up the first day. We got them on, and then they had the outdoor rink in Central Park, and I was running an outdoor clinic where Hockey in Harlem operates at it, but they didn't have hockey in Harlem. It was just a rink, not a hockey rink. It was just a giant skating rink, but we used it because it was ice. And I'll never forget skating around the ice. I saw a group of kids. They happened to be kids of color and Puerto Rican kids that didn't speak English that well because they had just immigrated from Puerto Rico. And I still remember their names. I still hear from them. And a bunch of black kids. And I said, you guys want to try hockey? And they all shook their head, yeah. Told them how you join the league and you sign up, and they needed equipment. And like a lot of kids, they didn't have the money. But we didn't have fancy constitution for our league. We had one saying in our league: we'll never turn any kid away for any reason. So we got every kid in. Didn't matter if they had money or not. We didn't care what they looked like. We got them in, and they played hockey. A couple of them are retired police officers and detectives in New York City. A couple of them are heroes from 9/11, retired fire captains. I still hear from one on a regular basis. His kids played, his grandkids played, and they played well. These kids could play. They just needed the opportunity. And that was a good beginning to it, because good, decent people ran the league that just cared about getting kids off the street and on the ice. And then, of course, in '92, when I came back to work for USA Hockey, they made me director of special projects. And one of the projects, and I didn't know, I never used the word in my life, diversity. I knew inner city. I grew up in a project in the inner city in Brooklyn, mixed. I had black neighbors, Jewish neighbors, Italian neighbors, Irish neighbors, Polish, everything. And every kid got along. We played sports together, but my friend Ralph, he was a black guy. He wouldn't play hockey. He said, Negroes don't play hockey. I said, Ralph, he was a good athlete too. I said, they do too. He said, no, they don't. I said, there's a guy in Boston named Willie O'Ree. They're coming in Wednesday night. This was the old Madison Square Garden. It cost 50 cents to get in. 30 cents car fare, but we snuck on, so we never had to come up with 80 cents. 50 was enough. And he went to the game with me, and I got a picture in my office. Willie O'Ree signed it. Him on the ice getting an assist that night. I was at that game, and Ralph took up playing hockey. So in my opinion, every kid, every boy and girl, everybody has a right to play anything they want, try anything they want. I always say, if you can serve in the military for your country, you sure as hell can do anything else that you want to try or you want to do. And I'm real happy to see that when I did go to USA Hockey in '92 to the executive committee, I said, if I'm director of special projects, I better come up with some special projects. One of them is inner city hockey. Will you support it? And I had a small budget. They approved it immediately. I went to look at one of the programs in Jack Adams' program in Detroit, did an interview with a local newspaper. Bryant was going, I think, visiting Hillsdale, some college out there, and a school. And he read the article and he called me. I was on my way to St. Louis for the National Sports Festival. And he said, I just got hired by the NHL and we want to be involved in inner city programs and stuff like that. I said, great. We eventually met. And now I got to tell you this, Bryant, not because you're on TV and everything and famous, but you did a lot and a great job. You really did. You brought it to another level, and so did Gary Bettman. And look, I can spot a phony from 100 miles away. And there's a lot of phonies in all these things, especially with race relations and everything. He wasn't phony, and you weren't phony. You guys, I knew it. You guys really financed it after that, gave it the name Diversity Task Force, hired Willie O'Ree. I recommended him because, again, I was old. I don't even know if you were born when he played. I remembered him. And I thought he was alive. And then, if you remember, I said, I can call Max McNabb. He coached them in San Diego with the Gulls. And you said, no, I'll talk to John Halligan, and ahead of the alumni of the NHL. And John was great. We lost him. He was a great man, good guy. And we got Willie on board, and the rest is history. And every single American should be proud and should want to include every single fellow, not just American, human being, to be a part of whatever the activity is. Doesn't matter what it is. We're one people, one nation. I did my DNA last year and I was stunned. I always thought I was American of Italian descent. And I did my DNA. I'll never forget, my mother was stunned, and she was well in her 90s. I said, Mom, we're not what you think we are. I got the DNA in front of me. We got a lot of different, mostly Southern Italian, but we also have Spanish from Catalonia, Greek, Arab, Jewish, a little bit of the British Isles. And I researched it. She said, you're full of it. That can't be. I know what we are. Well, here's what happens. When the Romans were in what's now Great Britain and Wales and Scotland and Ireland, they took slaves back to southern Italy 1,200 years ago with them. Those people couldn't call a Uber and go home. They were there for the rest of their eternity, and they mixed in with the people, and the other groups had dominated the island of Sicily for 200-300 years each. So naturally, and so we're all really one human race. There's no, you're this or you're that. We're just people. And we need to get along, and we need to help each other, and we especially got to take care of our kids and our elderly. Got a plug in for the elderly there. That's it. And hockey's going in a great direction. And like Bryant said, when we put this diversity thing together, there were 3 kids of color. Today, there's close to 40 in the NHL. That's pretty impressive. And Mr. Douglas has done a great job in a very sensible way, promoting and laying out the facts. And that's really, really, really helped. Big time. So all of you, thank you for supporting these programs and the people involved, and it's appreciated. And I think we have to do a lot more of this as opposed to throwing darts at each other. I'm done. Go ahead, move on.
This is why I invited Lou, because I knew it would be so much fun.
Thank you very much.
I knew you guys would too. Bill, you go ahead. You go ahead.
No, Lou's the best. Curious to hear your hockey story, Chanel. How did you get involved with the game? What got you involved in the game? And how did you land with the Kraken?
Oh man, what a story. So I'm the only girl in my family. I have 2 older brothers who are 6 years older than me. I'm adopted. So already from the jump, I was kind of handled as like the special little girl because it's what I was, and I kind of fit into that role pretty quickly. I was super girly growing up, but I had to go to all my brothers' practices. They were multi-season athletes. They weren't the best, but they were good enough to stay on teams and hopefully to keep them out of trouble. And I had no interest in sports whatsoever. And then when I got into late middle school, I started staying up and watching hockey every night. It kind of became a ritual to finish my homework before 7 p.m., which would be puck drop most times. And it just kind of became part of my routine. I really enjoyed the team aspect of the sport and how, everybody needs to show up that day when you go play. And I think if we as a society worked in that regard together, that we'd be more successful and understanding of each other too, because, just like Lou said, we're just one people, and we need some more compassion. And even if that means checking people into boards every now and again, then that's totally fine because it brings us together. I always laugh because it doesn't quite make sense that this girl from an inner city who's disabled loves hockey. It doesn't really make sense to me because I've never played it, and I didn't quite understand or know even about sledge hockey till I was in my late teens. So I never saw it from a disabled perspective. I was more just kind of a fan of the sport in general, and things kind of happened from there. I got involved with a lot of sports teams in my high school, and that kind of piqued my interest from a social media and marketing side as far as, making sure that people showed up to our games and, sharing the fandom with the students, especially for women's sports, because that in itself is kind of hard to break into too. And yeah, I was discovered on Twitter by my boss at the Seattle Kraken. She found me through a repost of an article that I wrote over the summer via Black Girl Hockey Club. They shared it, and that's how she found me. And I've been there for 5 months now to the date, and it's been quite an experience because it's one of the most untraditional hires ever. So I kind of like feel bad when people ask me for advice because I'm like, I was found online. Like that is probably the weirdest way to get hired. So I don't have any great advice in that regard other than, be true to yourself and the good things will follow.
Well, actually, Chanel, let me ask you, you mentioned the Black Girl Hockey Club. Why don't you explain a little bit about who they are and what they do?
Black Girl Hockey Club is an incredible organization. I think we're a nonprofit, but I'm not sure. I volunteer with them, and I have a meeting with them tomorrow, actually. And I made it a point when I got to the Seattle Kraken to make sure that we foster that relationship with them because we committed to the Get Uncomfortable campaign, which is to end racism on and off the ice and promote a healthier environment in that regard and to call out things when we see it and to be super genuine about it because it can be really easy to say, we took the pledge as an organization, but internally, externally, we want to make sure that our fans feel safe and secure with us, and that people inside the arena and inside of our staff feel the same way too. So Black Girl Hockey Club is kind of, self-explanatory in a sense. It's for Black women and girls to be introduced to the game and educate and share the love of the game amongst them. And they are open for allies and help in all sorts of ways. And we kind of just promote the game through that as well, because, as all of us have said, it's not traditionally pitched to a lot of minority groups, for a lot of reasons, economically mostly. So Black Girl Hockey Club really champions that, and they do a lot of great scholarship work for young girls who are trying to get into the game. And I saw them in the summer starting to build more of the following, and I followed them from the start because I thought this was such an important organization and something that needs to keep going.
I mean, that's a lot of work for what some people would consider a game. I mean, why are you so passionate about the game?
Kind of like what I said earlier, I think it's just such a unique sport, and that, it really does take a team. I feel like you can get away with having a couple lax guys on a team, depending on other sports that you play, and, a bench warmer, if you whatever, something to that effect. But everybody has to show up for that game day. Equipment managers, drivers, everything from the top down is super, super tight, and like, you need to show up for your people. And I feel the same way about the Kraken organization too. If one of us is not pulling weight or feeling good about what we're doing, it kind of affects all of us. So we have to, make sure that we're supporting each other, supporting our players when we eventually get them. I'm super excited for that process to happen. And I don't know, I just really love the game. I started following football first, actually, and I just couldn't help the fact that, it's a 15-minute spurt of time, but it takes 3 hours for it to play out when you watch it on TV. So definitely like the time constraint that hockey allows for as well.
Bryant, I want to take you back, not too far. I want to take you back to the summer. There was a tournament in New Hampshire where a team of Black and Hispanic players, an elite team of Black and Hispanic players, played a tournament. And you got in your car, you drove across the border, and you went to see them play, and you got really emotional about that. You want to explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was I tell the young people that work with me, said this for years, you get paid a salary, obviously, but you get paid in different ways. That day I got paid in a very different way. A group of parents and players entered an elite showcase tournament, and they recruited Black players from all over the Northeast, Black and Hispanic players, Black and brown players from all over the Northeast. It was a full team of Black and brown kids. I never had I seen anything like it. And they were the best team in the tournament, won the tournament, several high draft picks in the NHL. It was incredible to watch. I had never experienced it. But the topper of the whole thing, Lou and I worked on a program with Willie, where we brought players. We did the following. We brought players from all of the programs that we set up around the country, the stars of those programs based on their academics, their citizenship, and their dedication to the sport. That's how we chose the boys and girls. We flew them to an NHL city, and they were all stars. So you'll see in the film and Willie, one of the events that we did was in Washington, D.C., and that's where Willie had death threats from white supremacist groups. I mean, it was hard and it was challenging. But one of the players in that tournament as a 12-year-old was the general manager of this team this summer, Rod Braceful, who works with Louie at USA Hockey. I was blown away. When he said his name, I went, oh my! I saw the 12-year-old now in his 30s, standing in front of me. It was mind bending, and so it was emotional. I did shed a tear that here it is, full circle. all these years later that one of those kids was so influenced that he went into the game and then recruited all kinds of other kids of color to do it. So that fulfillment and that moment was one, frankly, I'll never forget. It was incredible to see. And now what's happening those things are happening all the time. The rapidity and the momentum. Chanel, I think, mentioned it, and Louis mentioned it as well. I've never felt a momentum like we felt right now like we feel right now in this game. There are people, boys and girls, men and women of color, playing at huge numbers. For those of you who have noticed, there's a National Women's Hockey League now. They unfortunately, COVID just canceled the last part of their season, but watch them. They're great players playing at an incredibly high level, and getting paid to play hockey as pro players. So it's a real breakthrough. They've got great momentum. The programs that we started have great momentum, but there's so much more work to do. There is a lot of work to do before it is as welcoming and inclusive, and frankly, before the sport makes everyone feel as though they belong. That's really the goal, is to make sure everyone feels as though they belong.
To piggyback a bit on what Bryant said about the tournament team, back in 2018, my wife, Corinne, who's actually a volunteer for the Black Girl Hockey Club as well, we went to London, England, to help screen another Black hockey documentary, Soul on Ice, Past, Present, and Future. We did it in October 2018. October is Black History Month in the United Kingdom. And we took the movie there. We showed it at a theater downtown. And some of the people that showed up, there was an Indian guy, and he was like the head of the UK's Referee Association. There was a very tall Black gentleman named Eddie Joseph. He runs sort of the Hockey is for Everyone program in East London. And another guy came, Brian Bidoff, and his son Mason. Brian Bidoff was one of the first Black players in England, and his son is an elite player in England. In fact, he captained the UK's under-18 team, I think at the last World Championships. So I met Mason in 2018. Fast forward to Bryant and the tournament in New Hampshire. Mason Alderson scored the winning goal in the final game. So that was sort of an interesting connection. And Bryant mentioned the Willie O'Ree All-Star game. There was one that was held in Chicago, and I just wrote about one of the players from that tournament team. His name is Gerald Coleman. Gerald went on to play in the National Hockey League. He actually got drafted by the Tampa Bay Lightning, played in 2 games. His NHL career was a total of 40 minutes, but that's 40 more minutes than I played. And he had a stunning minor league career, won 2 championships. When he played junior hockey in Ontario, his team won what's called the Memorial Cup, which is, hockey's big junior tournament. And that team that he played on was voted 2 years ago to be the Canadian Hockey League Team of the Century. So, the seeds that Bryant planted and Lou planted way back in the day, have taken hold and are growing. And that's just been amazing to watch. Sometimes I like to make Bryant blush. It's hard to make Lou blush, but sometimes I like to make Bryant blush about, everything that he's done. I mean, sometimes you think that what you're doing is a little thing, but they grow into big things. And this is where we are today. I mean, I might not be doing what I'm doing without Bryant and without Lou. Chanel might not be doing what she's doing without Bryant or Lou. And it's just amazing to see where this game is going. And, Bryant mentioned that several of those kids on that team were drafted by NHL teams. More importantly, a bunch of those players are currently playing college hockey, NCAA hockey at good schools, Northeastern, Boston College, American International University. The Hispanic player on the team, He, his dad grew up in Queens, grew up a Ranger fan, was too broke to actually play ice hockey himself, got married. It was a mixed marriage. Mom was a Ranger fan, dad was an Islander fan. And they raised their kids to play hockey. And now this kid, he accepted a scholarship at Harvard. He'll be playing for Harvard next season. So this is what hockey does. These are the possibilities. And that's why we're in this. That's why we're in this game. Because it's more than just a game. I mean, some people say hockey is life. And, it's a lifestyle. And I think that's the fun part with it. And I see Lou nodding. You agree with me, Lou?
Yeah, let me just say one little quick thing about somebody. You said something great before. You said one little thing somebody can do can make a difference. And all the people on the screen here and the others listening in, that's a very, very important point. I was watching a documentary once, and it was in India a long time ago. And this little nun named Mother Teresa was being interviewed by the BBC, and there were 1 million people standing in front of this gigantic building that was given by the English built it, and they were giving it to Mother Teresa to use to house and feed and help the desperately poor. And there were 1 million people all waiting to get in. And this she's smiling and looking at it, looking out at the group. And the interviewer said, Mother Teresa, how do you ever intend to deal with this mass of humanity and help them all? And she smiled, looked at him, and she said, by starting with one. And start with one person, and everybody can do something to help a kid that wants to play hockey, a boy or girl, handicapped or challenged or whatever race, color, poor, whatever they need help with. Everybody involved tonight, you can do something. You might think it's insignificant. You can change a life, maybe many lives.
Louis, I want to pick up on that just for a second, because I think it's really, really important. Coach Kunha at Williston sent me a note and asking, what can the players do individually? And Lou's point absolutely is to be heeded for all of the current Williston players. But the other thing you can do, right? It's Black History Month, which, by the way, makes me a little crazy. Every month should be Black History Month, right? Everyone needs to internalize and understand each other's history to be able to really have the empathy needed to do good things. So what I suggest to young players and to everyone, right? I'm going to take Lou's comment and just expand on it just a little bit, is this. I mean, this film, I'm in my mid-50s. This film made me do a deep dive. Ashamedly, I went to Williston. I went to good schools. I didn't really know. I didn't understand Black history in the depth that I should have until before the last 3 years. I really dove in. I read The Color of Law, The New Jim Crow. We'll put these in the chat. The Color of Law, The New Jim Crow, Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, and Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. Read those books or read something similar. Take the time, novel concept during Black History Month, learn some Black history, okay? Dive in and really understand. And my big takeaway from all of that, frankly, is that people who've read those books and have that understanding, they have a higher level of empathy, they have a higher level of understanding. It'll help the whole country. Hockey's just a metaphor here, folks. It's about everyone figuring this out, right? And finding common ground and ways to heal. And frankly, I'll just be completely direct about it. I'm not going to, I won't get political and I won't name names, but part of the reason for making this film is I saw someone dividing the country. And I said, enough. enough. It's ugly and it's not right. And this is a way to bring people together. The sport brings people together like very few things. So that was part of the explicit intent of this film, was to bring people together and to build bridges. So, Louis, I want to ask you one other quick thing, if you will, tell a quick story. Then I want to ask you a question, Chanel, as well. Somebody, our friend Chris Kelly is on from Alaska, and he said, "Hey, are there Native Alaskans or people who've grown up in Alaska in the league?" And one that jumped out to me was Scotty Gomez. You remember Scotty, Lou, right? I think he played for you, I'm sure.
Well, in 1980, right after we played and were good enough, that was a good team. We won the gold medal. It wasn't a miracle. Everybody says miracle on ice. Miracle my neck. That was a great hockey team. It was great. Some of our greatest players that ever played, U.S. kids, played on that team. It was a great team. They deserve credit. They earned it. They were not lucky. They beat everybody, except one tie with a great Swedish team. Anyway, I took Phil Vercoda from that team, and I asked him if he would go to Alaska with me, because they weren't included in we're USA hockey. We're not Minnesota hockey or Massachusetts hockey. That's where most of our players came from in 1978 and prior. And I said, we got to go. I have to, as coaching program director and in charge of player development for the U.S. at the time, only 4 employees. We now probably have 150, but there were just 4 of us with a small budget. I said, we got to go to Alaska and find out, Phil. We got to find out what's going. You just won a gold medal. Bring it with you. Show it to the kids. I'll call those people up and set up an itinerary, and we're going to do programs up there. They don't know about dryland training. We'll introduce it to them. And that's what we did. And we were up there 3 weeks, Fairbanks, Palma, Anchorage, Kenai, Soldotna. And they didn't have that many rinks. And they have a lot now. And I was stunned. I said, look at these kids. They can play, but they're so far away. Nobody knows about them. So the following summer, I invited 6 kids from Alaska and 2 coaches to come to our player development camp in Colorado Springs. And we had every district represented, every district. Kids from California, Texas, Florida. Could you imagine that, Florida? This is 78. Prior to that, if you looked at the rosters of USA hockey teams, almost all the players came from Minnesota, Massachusetts, a few sprinkled in New England, and once in a while, one out of New York State. Today, they're from everywhere. We got kids, look at our national teams. We got kids from Las Vegas, Nevada playing. And from it, so it goes to show you every kid, regardless of where they're from, what they look like, what God they worship, if any, they can play hockey, and boys and girls, and they deserve. And also, I don't want to say the wrong word, not handy. What do you call it? Sled hockey and that.
Disabled.
Disabled. That's right. Disabled and disabled hockey. And we compete and we win and we do great, and we're teams. The guys on the teams love each other. They don't look to see where you're from or what you look like. They want to win. And it's a lot of fun. And I forgot the question, but I'm finished. Go ahead.
Well, fast forward to the seed that Lou planted. There's a player named Isaiah Seville who came from Anchorage, an African-American from Anchorage, Alaska, played on the U.S. Junior national team 2 seasons ago. And he's currently the starting goaltender for the University of Nebraska at Omaha. So there's Lou's handiwork right there. And he got drafted by the Vegas Golden Knights in the 2019 NHL draft. So
he's an excellent player. Excellent player.
Exactly. I think we should have some questions.
I think that is a great idea. We've got people putting questions in the chat, and I know not everyone here is reading along with the chat. So if it's okay with everyone, what I'd love to do is open this back up to gallery view so you can see everybody who's here listening to you, and we could let them ask their questions of you directly. So we're going to go back, and those of you who've been putting comments and questions in the chat, I'm going to go ahead and just sort of make sure you're here and ask you to unmute and come on video if you like, and direct your question to whoever you are interested in speaking with. So someone who submitted an early question, which I'm scrolling back to find here. Tommy Reed, you here? Tom Reed? Some people are just on with like nicknames in their phones. So Tommy Reed's here. Chance for you to unmute and ask your question.
I have a question.
Oh, Bob, sure.
Yeah, I have to brag a little because I was Bryant's coach at Williston way back when. I don't know if he wants to admit that or not.
No,
But,
absolutely.
that was a fun team, wasn't it? I have fond memories of that team. Anyway, this has been really fun, great listening to you guys. But the question I have for whoever wants to take it, Bryant or Lou, or is I think the NHL has done some great things in advancing the cause of people of color. You mentioned that I think you said there are 40 players of color in the league right now, which is really good. But what do you think they can do moving forward? To make it better.
If I can take that.
Sure, I'll mute myself.
It's something that I think about. I never stop thinking about, right? It's been fantastic to see that number grow from 3 to 35, 40 players of color. It's terrific, right? And it's one metric. Now the question is, how do we get to 350? How do we do 10x again? Right? That's hard. And while that is a metric that's important, is that elite level representation, because if you can see it, you can be it, right? Is the way that it's probably best described. That said, more important, and it actually provides the solution to getting to 350. I think the most important piece of this puzzle is that 4, 5, and 6-year-old. Okay, that's where the action is, and that's what's going to change it. That's at the top of the funnel, right? Because I make the argument all the time to people of color, the most important sport, and this is echoing some of what Bill said. I look at it a little bit differently, though. The most important sport in the world for kids of color to play is hockey. And my friends, what are you talking about? It's not welcome and all this, why? What do you mean? It's really simple, right? Hockey's a great equalizer. And I'm a dad too, okay? I'm first and foremost, I'm a dad. And if I can only want and give one thing for my kids, just one thing, it would be resiliency, the ability to get back up. And hockey's such a great equalizer in that regard. Nobody's born with skates on. Nobody knows how to skate. So you get out there, you're 5 years old, and the first thing you do is you fall, and you got to get back up, right? And you learn that. You learn to get back up over and over and over again. It's a muscle. And that muscle, that resiliency, kids of color are going to need in a huge way in this country. All over the place they need it, right? And that mastery, that muscle of being able to take something hard and figure it out, that mastery from October when you can hardly stand up and you're falling down, to April when you're moving around and you've accomplished something really complex and difficult and challenging. It applies to STEM. It applies to everything else. It applies to everything else you do in your life, right? Where you need resiliency to get back up. From that, filling that big funnel at those early age groups, that's how we're going to get to 350. But more importantly, it's how we're going to change the country, and it's how we're going to help kids of color. Is by presenting challenges that they can rise to and rise to and rise to again. Sorry for the soliloquy, but that's how to do it. I'm convinced of it.
All right, thank you. Brittany, are you here? You had a question, and we're going to turn it a little bit back to the film for a second.
Yes, please. Thank you. Actually, Bryant, to your point about falling and getting back up, I'm an alum of Williston class of 2007. my first JV girls ice hockey practice, I go onto the ice with my skate guards on. It was classic Bambi, and I had no idea what the skate guards were, that they needed to be taken off. All the other girls helped dress me in the locker room downstairs. So shout out to the JV girls ice hockey team. It was an era. My question, did Willie need any convincing to make the film? In the film, I think I remember that he didn't need any convincing to join the NHL in that capacity, but did he need any convincing to actually make the film and be a part of it?
No, he didn't. Willie and I have been, working together for 25 plus years. And so we now have a level of trust that he knows that if I'm hot on doing something, that he trusts me with it, and that it's going to help the game, and it's going to help grow the game in a serious way. I talked to him about it, and there's people that have come in the past and asked him to do projects that he was a little bit leery of because he didn't know how he would be treated. Willie knew that I was going to do everything I can to showcase what he has done for the sport in a way that's very positive, in a way that's respectful of the people that he works with, that isn't in any way, shape, or form, tokenist, taken as a being a token. I mean, there was just, we do our, Willie's at his core, he is an authentic, earnest, humble, amazing man. And we wanted to reflect that, and he knew that I would do everything in my power, and the director that we chose would do everything in our power to do that. So it's from a deep well of trust. What our challenge is that Willie's been doing this for a long time, and he hits certain points really well, and he's got his go-to, and it inspires children, and it's fantastic. We had to get him to put that aside and just be himself, and we accomplished that. So Laurence did. She's a terrific interviewer. And Willie he was himself, and he did. I thought he did an amazing job in the film.
Question we're going to go to Richard Brown in the UK, because I'm impressed that he is awake at this hour. So Richard, if you want to unmute and ask your question, which I think, Bill and this is really open to anyone, but.
Yeah, it's addressed to everybody, but I'm trying to just open it up in comparison, really. Because it just seems to me it's such a contrast between basketball, which for a long time has seemed to be in a very equal sport, and hockey, which perhaps hasn't. And there must be reasons. I guess a lot of it's to do with resources, backgrounds, and things like that. But do the experts agree that's the case? And if it is, how do we address that imbalance? I know you're trying to do that, but how do we really? Are there lessons to learn from basketball, perhaps?
Well, I'll take that. Basketball, people don't remember that, it wasn't that long ago that the NBA, that Major League Baseball, that Major League Football integrated. I mean, baseball did it in the 1940s, which seems like a long time, but it's not that long. Basketball was the 50s, maybe 60s. And some of these teams, professional teams, didn't integrate. Some teams waited till the last minute. I live in Washington, D.C., and, I have cousins here and aunts here. And when I moved down here, I thought everybody was a Washington football team fan. We don't call it the R word anymore. And when I got here, I found there were a lot of people wearing Dallas Cowboy shirts and bumper stickers. And most of these people were Black. And I asked my cousin why. And he just said George Preston Marshall. And George Preston Marshall was the founder and the owner of the Washington football team. And they were the last team to integrate. And that was the 1960s. And the only reason why they integrated was they're moving to what was then RFK Stadium, and which was owned by not the agriculture department, like the forestry department for the federal government. And they said, if you do not integrate, you cannot use the stadium. The Washington baseball team, the Senators, the original version of the Senators, again, this is the 1960s. They moved to Minnesota and became the Minnesota Twins. And the reason why they moved to Minnesota, because the owner at that time, the late Calvin Griffith, found out at that time in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area, there were only 15,000 Black people living there. So we're not that far removed from that. Hockey is an interesting place, I believe, because in large part, it's a Canadian sport. And Canada has and had a small Black population, larger now, but smaller back then. Hockey is now an international sport. If you look at the NHL, we have a lot of players from Europe. We have a lot of players from Scandinavia. So we're sort of this large melting pot. And I think we're to the point now where we're coming to grips or understanding that it is a melting pot. So I think we're going through that. People ask about sort of incidences in hockey and why this happens. And again, people forget, and you're there in London. I'm sure you read about the racial incidents that happen in professional soccer over in UK and Europe. So, everybody's sort of coming to grips with this, trying to make their game more welcoming. So hockey's not immune to that. I think what has to happen in hockey, part of it, I think, is socioeconomic. To a little bit of Brian's point about getting to that 350. A lot of that, and a lot of you sort of pointed that out in your questions, is cost. This is a very cost prohibitive game. I mean, I'm a goalie, and when I go out and when I play, I'm wearing $3,000. I can do that. I have a job, but the average parent, that's a lot of money. And also its location. There aren't that many ice skating rinks near where a lot of people of color live. We have one indoor rink here in Washington, D.C., here in the District of Columbia. And ironically, it's in the middle of a Black neighborhood. So, it only seems right that rink is home of the oldest minority youth hockey program in North America. So if you have access to hockey, if you have sort of the resources for hockey, and hockey is trying to work on making the game more affordable. That to me is the final frontier, is to get to a point where if a 10-year-old kid wants to be a goalie, his parents don't have to take out a loan. So I think part of that has to happen. And I think if you get that, you'll start to see more people of color in the game. Once you get more in the game, people interact, people learn from people. And I think that's a very important element. And I think that just makes the game better.
No, thank you. That's a great answer. Thank you very much.
I want to ask also, to follow on from that, Chanel, with a completely blank canvas, what are the Kraken doing in that new market where they have no fans, and never mind fans of color? What are they doing, if you can talk about it, what are they doing specifically to attract a diverse fan base?
Yeah, I think it's a valid question to ask, and I think my favorite thing about this process of rolling out has been poaching fans from other organizations. It's been fun to watch. I was in a Twitter interaction last night where a bunch of Canucks fans were jumping ship and hoping they can land as a Kraken fan, and I think that we're doing a lot of stories, both local and beyond, and collaborating with companies and things that stand by what we do as well as an organization. So collaborating with Black Girl Hockey Club, collaborating with local Indigenous groups and artists to help, with campaigns that we're doing. I think by the work that, we're showing before we even hit the ice and before we even have players has been a huge impact on the fan base that we have already. And for a team that has no players and no a ton of front office staff right now, it's been interesting to see how many people are so invested and ready to go, when we are too, and watching the fan base grow a little bit each and every day. And I'm excited for, when our mascot, I think, gets released. I don't know what it is yet. So that would be a fun surprise for me as well. But just kind of taking note of what we can do before we have people in our organization as players and even, as I said, front office people we're just trying to make sure that we present ourselves as a welcoming organization, and it does help that we're in a very progressive area, being in Seattle. I'm a Boston Bruins fan first, so you can imagine as an original six team, there's a lot to grow from where we are in that regard. But starting from scratch is actually probably the easiest part about having a more inclusive fan base, and I think that that is shown true all the way. And I see people with merch on all the time, and we haven't even, we don't have players. So I think that that part's always really cool. And yeah, like I said, a lot of collaboration with really important groups and organizations, even ones that people haven't even heard of yet, I think has served us best.
If I could ask one other question of Lou, or another question of Lou, as well, because this is a story that I treasure that Lou doesn't tell very often, and I'm going to ask him to tell it now. The cross fertilization, as Chanel has mentioned, and different people on the call have mentioned, and influences that have kind of take the game from here to there. Lou was, as he mentioned, was on that amazing team, was part of it, and helped build that amazing team in 1980. But a lot of the learning and a lot of the the foundation was built by a guy named that Lou met, named Anatoly Tarasoff. You want to talk about Tarasoff and how you met him and where you met him, Lou, and what you did?
Yeah, well, I played roller hockey. We didn't have an ice rink, and it was great. Played every day. But in my day, you got drafted into the military, which I hated when I got drafted. I came home one day, I was 18, my mother said, "You got mail." I never got mail. I said, "From who?" She said, "Open it up," and I did. Congratulations, you're in the U.S. Army. And you have to report to Whitehall Street, downtown Manhattan, and get a physical. Anyway, I'm in the Army for 2 years. The greatest thing that ever happened to me. I didn't know it then. I wanted to play hockey, baseball, sports. I was a kid. I always worked since I'm 12 years old till now. I always had a job. I loved working. And so anyway, I go to the Army, I get out, and that's when we got the first ice rink. It was too late for me, 21 or 22, eventually, by the time I got out. And so we start this ice hockey league, and I'm at a game one night, and Bart Grillo, he's dead now, he's a great man. I worked for me. I installed air conditioners in Brooklyn and Queens. Once I installed an air conditioner for Louis Armstrong's wife in Corona, Queens. How many people could say that? That was a thrill. We got a $5 tip too that day. So anyway, I go to church, and Italian-American families on Sundays, they have big meals after church, usually about 1 o'clock. 40 people, 30 people, all relatives, family. So I'm there and we're eating, and I'm bored. I'm a young guy. I want to get out. And I said to my grandmother, "Can I go into Uncle Willie's room and watch the TV?" She said, "Yes." And he had a card table, played pinochle with a pad, a pencil, cards, ashtrays, little Zenith black and white TV with aluminum foil and the rabbit ears. Terrible picture. I turned it on by accident. Turn it on, and there's a hockey game, Wild World of Sports. It was 1969, I think, World Championships in Sweden. And it caught my eye. I mean, I went to every Ranger game. I had a season's ticket. It cost a hell of a seat, $70 for the year. 35 home games, Madison Square Garden. So I'm looking at this game and I'm saying, what kind of hockey is this? Soviet Union versus Sweden for the gold medal, the World Championship. Russia won. Soviet Union won, I think, 3-2. And during the game, they zoomed in on Tarasoff. Already I saw that face with the nose. I knew he was a character. And I didn't know who he was, but I liked him. And they had his name. I took a pencil and the pad and I tried to write out, what kind of name is that? Anatoly. I wrote it, Anatoly Tarasoff. It's pronounced Tarasoff. And I crumbled it up, folded it up, put it in my sport coat pocket. went in for pastries and espresso coffee and that, and left. And next day I brought the coat to the dry cleaners across from where I lived. Needed to be cleaned. And I brought it in, and the woman said when I was leaving, we knew each other. She said, "Lou, you left something in the pocket." I took it out. It was his name. I said, "Throw it away. I don't need it." Then I said, "Nah, give it to me." I took it, went home. I wrote him a letter complimenting him and his team and telling him how much I enjoyed watching that hockey. I'd love to learn that kind of hockey. That was beautiful. Who do you mail it to? I didn't know how to, where do you mail it? So I had an envelope. I folded up the letter. I put it in the envelope. I wrote, "Mr. Anatoly Tarasoff, head coach, national hockey team of USSR, Moscow, USSR." Next day, I'm working. This was a Sunday. I'm working with Bart. In the morning, we're driving on Flatbush Avenue, heading towards Manhattan to do some work down in lower Manhattan. And I saw a post office. I said, "Bart, pull over. I want to mail this letter I have." I had no stamps. I went in. I made $60 a week. That was my salary. I go into the post office and they waited. They saw it was going to USSR, the Soviet Union. And the guy looks at me, he says, $3.36, please. I say, "Are you crazy? I make $60 a week. The letter can't, I think it was 6 cents to mail a regular letter." I said, "I can't afford that." He said, "That's the price. You should have used different paper." And I almost didn't pay him. I almost walked out. And I don't know what made me pay. I had $5 bill. I paid it, but wouldn't have any money for lunch that day. And months later, I received a letter. I knew then what paper he meant. It was like tissue paper. It said par avion or something. I found out French for airmail. And he wrote me a letter inviting me to the Soviet Union as his guest. And he wrote in the letter, typewritten in poor English, with different color ribbons. They must have kept running out of ink or something. And he said, "I hereby invite you to be my guest at the Central Army Club headquarters in Moscow and make arrangements, and use this letter to get a visa." I didn't know what a visa was. I never heard of a visa. And he explained a little bit, broken, but I understood it. And I couldn't afford the plane ticket, $700-800. I couldn't afford that. So I never did go right away. But in 1971, he brought a team over before the 72 Olympic Games in Sapporo. And they were playing our 72 Olympic team, an exhibition game at Madison Square Garden. And I called Emil Francis, who was the coach, general manager, vice president of the Rangers. His kid played on my team. And I said, "Mr. Francis, is there any way you can give me, I'll buy the tickets for the whole team. Can you get me a discount? I need 25 tickets. I want the guys to see this team play because I know they're going to be great. And it'll be a good learning experience." He said, "Oh, it's not a sellout. There's only about 7,000 seats sold. I'll just give them to you." Well, his kid played on the team. That helped. And he did. And when the game ended, I asked him if he could sneak me down to meet, I want to meet Tarasov after the game was over. And he got me in, and I went up to him. They had an interpreter with him, and I put my hand out, and he shook my hand. I said, "My name is Lou Viro, and I wrote you a letter. You wrote back. You invited me. I loved what I saw tonight. I mean, I'm an American. I cheer for my side, but you guys won 12-2, and you didn't even play your best players. Your goalie's 16 years old. His name was Tradiak, 18. He was 18 years old. His name was Vladislav Tradiak. He's the president of the Russian Federation today. Good guy. And so you're the American who sends compliments to me. You know what we say in Russia? When you compliment us, you want to steal from us. You want to steal our ideas and our secrets. I said, "Yeah, of course I do." Anyway, I got to go after the Olympics in '72 and got to meet him. We became very, very good friends with his entire family. We had many, many, many times I published the book for him, and many times his last book, he said he didn't trust anybody in Russia to do it. And I stayed at his dacha several times, got drunk with him, fell asleep under a plum tree that he made schnapps out of. And his wife woke us up sprinkling cold water on our face. This was in the summer, of course. And we had gone mushroom gathering in the morning. She was making mushroom soup, so she wanted to wake us up. And he was a tremendous influence on hockey in our country. Tremendous influence, because I was able to not steal. Because here's what he told me, and I'll tell this to any coach that's paying attention. He said, you can take some principles, some ideas. He was a really smart man, and from other coaches or other cultures, but don't copy. For to copy is to be second best. A copy is never good as the original in anything in life. Never as good as the original. Take it and then look at your culture. Your people are different than my people. We have different cultures. Do what you think would work in your culture. In the US, you're clever people. You're smart businessmen. That's what he told me. He was a beauty, I'll tell you. And I paid attention to him, and I never copied. And then I said to him, he said, when I was there, he said, why did you come exactly? What do you need? I said, I want to learn how you do this, what you do. He said, anything specific? I said, yeah, I'd like to know drills from offense to defense, defense to offense. And he wore a military uniform. He was a colonel in the Red Army. He was intimidating. Everybody was afraid of him. He had power, real power in that kind of a government, in the, a dictatorship government. And he said, okay, here, you'll be taken to your room, which was a little room with a table, toilet, a cot, and a light bulb and a string, and that's it. The bath towel for 2 weeks was the size of a napkin. It was a little thing. I said, well, they don't bring clean towels. He said, wash that by hand and hang it out the window. It'll dry. And they had no toilet paper. They had this Vestia newspaper trimmed into triangles, stacked up on the sink. That's the way it was. I didn't care. Well, I'm from Brooklyn. Where do you think I came from? Waldorf Astoria. So it was all right. And he said, okay, here's a stack of rink diagrams, a red pencil and a regular lead pencil. He said, I'll give you 6th grade drills tomorrow, but you'll have to change them. You don't want to copy. So, okay. I said, what are you giving me this for now? He says, because you're going to bring me 100. 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, I want 100 of yours. I said, I don't even know 2. He said, 100, silence, out. And that was it. I never went to bed. I stayed up all night. I can still see the string in the light bulb, half blind, trying to make up drills. It was horrible. I got about 30 done, and I never went to sleep. And I brought him to him. He was there on time. He had a little wagon, a woman with a wagon with pastries and tea and stuff. And I didn't want to show I was exhausted. So I said, here they are. I gave him the whole 100, but there was only 30 done. I think he knew it. He took the first one and he looked. Asked a few questions, took the red pencil, put a big X on it, yet, and threw it on the floor. Took the next one, about 4 or 5 like that. I said, can I see one of yours now? At this point, I said to myself, Lou, you got to get out of here. What'd you do this for? You're insane. This guy's a maniac. You can have a nice life at home right now. What are you doing? So anyway, I took one of his. He gave it to me. It was beautifully illustrated. Perfect, of course. And I'm looking at it, and I asked a couple of dumb questions, and he responded with smart answers. I took the red pencil, I put an X in it, and I threw it. Yet, because I had enough. And he got up. I'll never forget it. I was petrified. So was the interpreter. He got up and he was a big guy, you know, with that uniform and red stars on it. And he walked over to me and he looked at me. So I stood up automatically. He put his arms out and he hugged me. He hugged me. And he said, there's not one Russian coach, Soviet coach in this whole nation of ours that would ever say to Tarasov, "Niet," and throw it on the, not one. So he said, you may not have brains, but you have courage. And that's very important if you're going to coach. And he said, we can be friends. And we were. We became wonderful friends. I think he's changed hockey in the world. I'm happy to say to everybody here, look at the hockey you see today in the NHL. You'll never, if you live long enough, you might see better, but there's never been hockey like you see today. And the main reason, the main influence on that was this man. He changed the game. He was a very smart, wise man that looked years ahead, and every country learned something from these great, including Canada, and he had deep respect for Canadian hockey and players, but they learned a lot from this guy. And you just look on the ice now, you see players from all over the world, you see players of color, you see everything the way it should be. And that's why we have a great global game. And the NHL is a tremendous league, tremendous. And I say Tarasov was the main person that accomplished this. And they don't have a Tarasov in Russia anymore. And it's really hurting. It's really hurt their game and hurting their game. He was that outstanding. Of course, he was able to do what he wanted. I mean, he practiced 8 hours. His teams practiced 8 hours a day, 11 months a year, no exaggeration. And when I asked him, he said, every man and woman in the Soviet Union works 8 hours a day. Why shouldn't players? You imagine trying that with our athletes, 8 hours a day? And his training was brutal. It wasn't easy, but he was a good guy and he knew how to communicate. He had the most important quality of any coach. He was a leader. He knew how to treat people. He might have been tough like that, but he also was, at the right moment, he was very kind-hearted. And even if it was as he walked past you after brutalizing you in a training session, he might walk past you and go, say something nice like, Maladets in Russian, good guy, good work, good job. You know, and that meant everything to his players. I saw them, they would be exhausted and then lifted up like that, ready to go hard again. That's it, Bryant. That's what I.
No, I think it's an important story because and I think it's analogous to today, right, and where we are right now, because you just don't know where the influences are going to come from, and he was so far off the traditional hockey map. Louis found him, right, and did the work. There are coaches, there are players who are not on the traditional hockey map because they've not traditionally been included. The Canadians, when Lou went in the 60s, the Canadians played the Russians in a huge series in 1972, and the Canadians looked down their noses. They thought they were going to run them out of the rink. And the Russians just absolutely just took them to task. Right, the Canadians ended up barely winning that series, and it changed hockey forever. And it was this one guy who just believed deeply in what he was doing. Lou was smart enough to find him and navigate to him. And I think it's frankly because he knew so much about the Russian system. It's one of the reasons that that the Americans won in 1980. Lou knew who he was playing
That's
against.
why Herb asked me to come and assist him.
Yep.
And we did do against the Russians early in the first period. We made a big change, and it changed the momentum of the game. We were having a difficult time getting out of our zone, and we made a little change because I knew how they forechecked, exactly how. And I had coached the national under-20 junior team the year before, and we played the Soviet under 20 team. You know who was on that team? Kasatanov, Krutov, Larionov, you can imagine.
Great.
And yeah, great players. And they barely beat us. Their goalie was player of the game, but they were up 3-0 after the first period. Then we outscored them the rest of the game, 3-2. But they beat us 5-3 with an empty net goal. And the thing is, the way they forechecked, I knew they were going to do that in the Olympics. I knew it because Tikhonov was the coach of the Olympic team, and Davidov was the coach of the junior team, and they were best friends and defense partners for Moscow Dynamo for 12 years. So he was grooming players for the big team and using the same system that Tikhonov used. So I knew that, and I knew how to counter it, and I explained it. You know, Herb, I don't want to take credit. Herb was a great coach, and Greg Patrick was. They did the super job. I just came in basically during the Olympics in Placid, as he asked me to, and gave me a walkie-talkie to the bench from up top, and then come down after each period. And I didn't have to say much or do much, but in that game, I knew what the Russians were going to do. I was the advanced scout for all the games. And Herb didn't like the idea. He said, I'm not sold on it. I said, it'll work. And we didn't start doing it. So I said, explain to them if we make a change, if you change your mind, so our guys will know what to do. And don't wait till in between periods. It could be too late. And he said, okay. And he did. And 3 minutes into the game, one of the few times I said anything with the mic, with the walkie-talkie, I said, Craig, tell Herb to go to that breakout system now before it's too late. And he shook, I could see him. I sat above them, shook his head, went over, whispered, and Herb shook his head, went down, told the players, go do this little reverse thing we did. And we had no trouble coming out of our zone, and we beat a superior team in many ways, but our guys were great and played great and deserved to win that game with their own skill and desire. So yeah, and I think it was handy to know a little bit about the Soviet so-called secrets, although Tarasov would say to you, like he did to me, there are no secrets. He says, today's secret is tomorrow's common knowledge. That was one of his favorite sayings. Just an adversary sees you play once, they know what you're doing.
It shows it's diversity from a very different lens, but it's still diversity, right? Diversity of ideas and thoughts, and bringing in influences that impact, right? Change the game. But thanks, Louis, for sharing that. I appreciate it. I know we have more questions, Bill and Jill as well. Do you want to go to a few more?
Yeah, we've got a couple more questions, which I hope everybody is willing to stay with us a little longer. I know we said that we were on till 8:30, but if you are willing to stay with us, Chanel and Bryant and William and Bill and Lou, I'll summarize a couple of the comments we have coming in, because I know Lou's not looking at the chat, but Lou, if you haven't written a book yet, there is huge demand for you to write a book. So you've got a willing readership right here on this call. And also we've got someone on this call who just thinks you're a beautiful person and just loves your energy and your outlook on life. So I know you're not looking at the chat, so I wanted to share that there is a Lou Vero fan club forming right here.
If there's any single rich women.
This is happening right at this very moment. You know, you never know. So two questions that have come up that I think I just want to take really quick, and then one more question for you, Brian, to wrap it up. But David Mayer, you had a question that goes back to some of what we were talking about getting people into the sport. If you want to unmute and ask the panel that.
Sure. I wrote a lot of things. Which one were you referencing?
I think I was looking at your last question, which was sort of because actually everyone on the panel too is involved in nonprofit and philanthropic organizations.
Oh, yeah.
Went to supporting that.
Yeah. So a lot of this, like a lot of things, it revolves around economics. And Bryant, I think you've got something to say about this, and probably our friend from USA Hockey. By the way, I'm your president of your fan club. That philanthropy has got to play a role in this, right? In making this accessible, this sport, this expensive sport, accessible. And so how is philanthropy being brought into this? And perhaps NHL is making gifts, which is great. But that could be looked upon as an investment for the NHL and not necessarily philanthropy. But I'm sure there are donors out there. And how is that going? And what's happening with that, Bryant?
Yeah, it's a great question. And yeah, the sport is expensive, right? And there are access issues, as Bill Douglas pointed out earlier, and those access issues have to be overcome. Part of that is rinks, right? Being able to finance rinks, and right after, or as part of my time at Trinity, and after my time at Trinity, I went to Trinity College. We needed a rink. I mean, you just needed a rink for kids to play on. It was a non-starter. We were having to drive across Hartford, Connecticut, and kids in the neighborhood weren't getting a chance to play. And we at Trinity, I mean, we got that built through major gifts, frankly. Major gifts as recruited by the college in a very concerted, organized way. That's how we got that rink. And there's thousands of rinks around the country that have been built in the same way, right? Where it's just the community decided this is important. This is a public good. We're going to all rally together and do this. Now, spreading that down wide and far as it pertains to ice time and equipment and providing access where barriers of entry exist is also happening, and it's happening in an uneven way. Probably the best way to say it. There hasn't been a foundation who said, yes, let's make sure every kid can play. That hasn't happened yet, and it would be fantastic if it did. So in time, perhaps, but it's been very much dependent on the family saying we're going to take our hard-earned resources and effort and time and apply it to our son or daughter to play this expensive sport. So a lot of it right now still emanates from the family.
One thing in regard to Williston that I think is kind of cool. So I was a summer school student in 1982, and we had a hockey rink, and that was a big deal. And I remember that I was there living in Sawyer, I think it was Sawyer, taking English and math. And there was also a hockey camp going on, and they were at the rink. And so the school was able to, monetize that asset that they had, which was great. Neat kids that were part of that summer, of course. But it really put Williston, I think, on the forefront. And I don't even know when that hockey rink was built. Was that in the mid-70s? Does anyone know?
Yeah, I think the zone was built in the 70s, I think, David. Yeah, so it's been there a long time. First rink I ever had access to all the time in my entire life was when I went to Williston.
Now, one thing I want everyone to know, I graduated with Bryant, proud graduate. Bryant came onto campus. He was an immediate leader. Everybody knew it. He was the leader before he was a academic guy and a hockey player and a soccer player. And it's really neat to see what you've done over the years, Bryant. It's great for the class and it's great for the school.
Thanks, David. That's highly appreciated. It really is. Bob and Jay just pointed out that the rink was built in 1964. Thanks, Jay.
I saw Jay. I knew Jay Grant would have the answer, and I saw Bob jump in there as well. So I'd like to, as we're sort of beginning to wrap up, we've got one more question, which kind of takes us all the way back to what brought us together tonight, which is talking about Willie and about being a player of color. And T, the mysteriously initialed T, if you're still on the call, you had a question that kind of goes all the way back to what it was like for Willie when he first started playing and what he encountered on the ice. Do you want to jump on with your question?
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to say, I guess in relation to some of the comments made by Bill Douglas, thanks for the perspective. It was really interesting to hear. However, hockey seems to be the least welcoming of the other sports from a race perspective. So I just wanted to ask the audience overall, any additional thoughts apart from cost as to why that is? for example, during the movie, it was pretty disturbing to see that white supremacists had threatened to blow up the arena, and this is like in the 2000s. So had wanted to know what else is being done to make players of color feel welcome and safe.
Yeah, if I can jump in on that one, and others please, but I really want to address this one. This is the work that has to be done still, right? We've done a lot. It's been gratifying in a lot of ways. Thanks for all the kind comments. That said, as Willie put it so well, our work is not done, right? I'm dealing with, because I've been around this for a long time, I get a lot of phone calls, and a lot of the phone calls I get are about kids of color being called names on the ice, like today, this week, last week. This is still happening, and it's got to stop. That's one of the reasons we made the movie, right? We wanted to show that kids of color, this is what happened to Willie in the 1940s, 50s, and all through his life, and it's still happening. Enough, right? It's ridiculous at this point that everyone is not embraced and welcomed in a game that it's just really, and again, it's bigger than hockey. It's about opportunity, and it's about belonging, right? That people have to read the books that I've suggested, and to do a deep dive into why the country is where it is, right? It's the greatest wound in the history of this country, and we've never dealt with it. We've never dealt with it. It really metastasized and showed itself on January 6th. When we're brave enough to do what Rwanda, Canada, South Africa, and Germany have done, which is truth and reconciliation, to talk about this openly. If January 6th doesn't say to this country that we need a little self-reflection, we need a little therapy right now, collectively, I don't know what will. And the reason that Germany was forced to do reconciliation after World War II was because we made them. We insisted on it. We should insist that we do it ourselves as a country. We need to do it. I'm hoping that the current administration has the guts and the bravery to do what Canada did 5 years ago around the Indian Resettlement Act, and about the way that they've treated Indigenous people. People think of Canada as being above the fray. They've got their own issues. That I lived them, and I saw that when I grew up there, and I know it now. All of us do. We have to be brave enough as a country to face this, to face it down, and to talk about it openly, and to find solutions. If we continue to pretend that race is not an issue in this country, we are wrong. That's why we made the movie.
So thank you. I feel like on that note, we want to thank all of the panelists for joining us. I do, Bryant, want to ask you one more thing, but we have got a ton of current student athletes on this call, and I would love it if you could just say a little bit about your student athlete experience at Williston and your college athletic experience, and any words of wisdom or mentorship that you can drop for everyone who is giving up important studying time to listen to this wisdom tonight.
Absolutely, and I'm happy to answer that. First, I want to, before we finish, I want to really thank Bill Douglas for helping us, and Lou Vero for helping us, and all of his wisdom, and Chanel for all of your wisdom, and for helping us, taking the time to do it. To my, part of my DNA, which is Williston, part of my world. I was at Williston for 1 year, only 1 year, and I was lucky enough to hang out with Chris Kelly and Dave Mayer and Kathy Bardagy and Bob Shaw and Jay Grant and others that I love on this call, and it's just wonderful to see. But that 1 year was so transformative, I can't even begin. I have not, and proof of that, it's kind of crazy. I've graduated, it'll be 40 years, which is insane, but I have not gone a single month in almost 40 years without talking to someone from Williston. That's pretty crazy, right? I have a tight-knit group of people like Bob Lober and others that I live nearby here in Boston, so I talk to them all the time. But the relationships that you are forming right now will change your life. They really will. Embrace each and every one of them. There's learning from everyone that you're going to school with right now, and there's learning from that kid in the back of the cafeteria who you never talk to. Sit down and talk to him or her. Get to know them. Take the time to do that, right? Especially kids of color, or especially kids who are not like you. Take a minute and go say hello. We're spending a lot of time right now on this committee that I'm on, called the ARC Committee at Williston, really diving into some of the issues that are going on, have gone on, and are going on campus. And I don't want to pontificate for too long here, but it's an incredible place. It's a really special place that deserves to operate under a blanket of belonging, where everyone belongs on that campus. It shaped me in ways that I can't even begin. And that's because I was open enough and empathetic enough to listen to others and learn from others. That's what I took from it. And that's what I did my best to do. Do the same. Do the same.
All right. With that,
One quick thing. We
yeah.
have a young lady in charge of diversity and inclusion at USA Hockey. If any of you have questions or want to ever contact her,
Great point.
Stephanie Jackson. She's doing a great job. Mrs. Davis from the NHL has been involved helping us and has helped this young lady. Contact Stephanie and she can answer questions for you. And she's also very busy in bringing so many new groups into USA Hockey.
Chanel, any plug that you'd like to make for any organizations you're representing, anywhere anybody can find you if they have questions? I think, what you've accomplished in carving out a career as a voice in social media is huge, and I think of a lot of interest. So, anything you can recommend to people about making sure that their voices get heard?
Yeah, I mean, if you have any adversity that you face and you're an athlete, whether it be with mental health or physical health or anything like that, people are so open to sharing stories and reading about them too, because there's a lot of sides to athletes that we don't often get access to. And I think starting conversations internally and really having honest conversations inside the locker room too is super important. So that's kind of what happened to me. I started sharing my story and my, kind of backwards exposure to hockey, and the fact that it doesn't really make sense in a lot of ways that I'm a fan, but, I am. And sharing that story ultimately got me my job. So you never know what happens if you share your story. So that's my advice.
Bill, any final words of wisdom, advice for our attendees? Oh, you're mute, Bill.
You're muted, Bill. Oh.
All right, Bill, wait, hold on. There we go.
Yeah, thank you. Just to pick up on what Brian talked about and to pick up on T's question, in terms of what else is being done to make players feel safe and welcome. One of the things that's important, and it's sort of incumbent upon us, but incumbent upon everybody, is that we're not going anywhere. We're here. We're going to keep playing the game. We're going to go in the locker room, put on the equipment, get on the ice, and play. And you can't be discouraged, and you can't be stopped just because somebody doesn't want you there. If you let somebody get to you like that, they win. And I think that's been the most important thing about this journey, is that you just can't let people win. I tell people I'm a goalie because I like to deny people their dreams of scoring. And that's what a little bit of why we're here. Now, on the practical side, some of the things that are being done. Bryant and I talked about the all black and brown team that competed and won the tournament in New Hampshire. The NHL was a sponsor of that team. The NHL is doing things, are involved in things that are helping to try to make people feel more welcome, to make the sport more inclusive. The league has a declaration of principles that its clubs, its workers have to adhere to. It's a battle, and it's a battle that's, years in the making, and it's a battle that continues. but it's a battle. It's a battle that can't be stopped. You know, you can't give up on it just because something happens. You know, I give credit to a lot of the black and brown NHL players of this generation. You know, we've gone through various iterations of, I mean, from Willie's day back in 1958, you know, if Willie complained, you know, he might have to worry about being sent in the minor leagues and never coming back to the National Hockey League. And that happened, you know, people don't realize it was 16 years between Willie and the second black NHL player, Mike Marson of the Washington Capitals. He and Bill Riley were teammates together on that team. And I talked to them a lot, and they talk about, you know, whatever happened with them, they kept inside because they were worried about being sent to the minors for being viewed as malcontents or complainers. This generation of player now, maybe it's numbers, maybe it's, you know, the world in which we live, maybe it's the rise of social media. They speak up and they speak out. And I think that's important to help stop what's going on in the game. You know, they speak with each other. They have formed a bond and a brotherhood, and they will stand up for each other, and that's important as well. So I think those are some of the things that are happening to help make players feel more welcome. You know, like Brian said, it's a work in progress, but the work is being done.